Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Dr. Thomas Hemingway here. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out.
All right. Today we have a wonderful guest who is just such a sweet soul, knows so much about holistic things, especially holistic dentistry, which is really of interest to me. As many of you know, I have a lot of dentists in my family, but I love her approach most of all. And she's a best-selling author, written a couple of books. She's just really great with these things, as well as aromacologist. Most people don't even know what that is, and I hope we'll get to that as well. But we have today Nadine Artemis on the show. Welcome, Nadine.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, man, we are so excited to have you today. I would love it if you would give us a little bit of your background, how you got interested in the dentistry part in particular. You wrote the book, Holistic Dentistry, and I know you have a keen interest in that. Tell us how that unraveled.
Yeah, so I was botanical formulating, which is a bit of another story, but by the time I'm like 18, 19, 20, I'm really understanding, I'm like importing raw materials, and I'm really making different skincare. And I'm really starting to also understand, different approaches to the body, which I feel like interweaves with skincare and taking care of the body. But, just really understanding like a whole new fresh world of how to take care of a lot of the, the kind of micro stuff that kind of gets us down, nothing major, but like a stomach ache, headache, rashes, eczema, all that stuff that people commonly have, not a medical emergency, but definitely can hamper our life. So I felt like I'd really, was beginning to figure that out, had great skincare formulas and blah, blah, blah. But then I felt like there was a big gap with taking care of the mouth, and I definitely, as most people, going to the dentist wasn't that fun and kind of confusing and awkward, and definitely not a lot of like information, knowledge, I guess like not that we know what informed consent is when we're kids, but really like understanding like what's going on with the body and the teeth. And, we weren't even kind of told about teeth. It's just like you go and then they're cleaned, and then like then you find, you're probably not cleaning it well. You get the little jaw that comes out, you look how to floss your teeth again. And that's supposed to be it. And then good luck till we see it in 6 more months or a year. And that whole cycle. And so I'm in my 20s, and definitely avoiding a bit of the dentist. I'm a young entrepreneur. I'm not under the care of the family dental plan anymore, and, avoiding the dentist, but, then inevitably going, and then also just trying to figure it out. It's like, if I've got all these solutions for every other part of the body. So, this is a long time ago, but I found the holistic dentist, quote unquote, at the time. And they were okay. I mean, they're still handing out crust and doing root canals and stuff, but the hygienist was great. And she was like, we had to gum things and, because you got to stay on top of that. But then really it was like looking at the tooth, and she saw the beginning of a cavity. And she's like, well, just go home and concoct stuff with your herbs and everything. And like, come back in 6 months and we'll x-ray it again. And I was like, what? Like, you have a chance? Like, we're alive, like I didn't just know that you even could stop a cavity or reverse it and all that kind of stuff. So, with about a decade of research before I wrote my book, and doing so many of my own experiments and really perfecting the home care of the teeth, so what are we doing? Okay, we're not going to be brushing with Crest and rinsing with Listerine. Like, what's the whole new program? So going into that and taking years to perfect my 8 steps, and then interviewing dentists, researching, and just finding such a wealth of information. So that was really eye-opening. And one of the main things that really spoke to me, I really love the work of Dr. Hal Huggins, and he's a dentist. He passed away just a few years ago, but since 1963, he'd been, advocating and warning people about mercury in dentistry. So his knowledge is super deep. And also he was lecturing once, and I think it was the son or a relative of Dr. Weston Price, who was the president of the American Dental Association in the 1930s, and has a really good book on, I think it's called Nutrition and Degeneration, if I've got that correct. But he was, he traveled around the world in the 1930s with his wife, kind of like Indiana Jones style, and studied cultures and and peoples in all different countries, and like how their oral care was, or like, you know, skulls that were like in Peru, or skulls that I guess they used to keep church skulls in the basement of churches in Europe for some reason. So he's able to study that.
Or Peru as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Or even look at like twins where they would have different lifestyles, and then seeing the difference in the mouths and that kind of stuff. So this treasure trove of his research was actually passed along to Dr. Hal Huggins as well. I forgot where I was. Oh yeah. And so he had this book, because I was like anything he'd written. And I found this rare, you know, used book called Why Raise Ugly Kids. He did have a sense of humor, but he had a very extensive dental chapter. And he talked about the day when all of his dental training just washed away, like, you know, like sandcastles on the beach. And he was speaking to Dr. Ralph Steinem. And luckily, even since I published my book, all of his research is now published, and it is available on Amazon in one of those sort of more expensive researchy books, but it's really great. And his work and research from thousands of studies is on the dentinal lymphatic system, which I find so fascinating. I mean, it was just a few years ago, we found out we had a lymphatic system in the brain. And many dentists don't know about this dentinal lymphatic system. And I loved it, because when I'm looking at a part of the body, or thinking about, you know, how we're going to care for this part of our body, the skin, whatever, hair, nails, the whole thing, I always kind of like I like A, to be totally low maintenance. Like, what's the least amount of effort I can do to take care of myself is a good goal, I think. And then I kind of step out of the way and think, well, you know, we weren't born with a toothbrush in our hand. So what are the body systems that are designed to take care of this? And then how in this modern time are we getting in the way or thwarting that system? So I like to start there. And I found that this information was like the key. So what's so key about that is because we do have an internal system that helps our teeth cleanse and prevent cavities. So what happens is when we chew, those nutrients, which, you know, the chemical messengers of food, activate the parotid glands by the jaw, and then they activate the hypothalamus, as I feel like everything eventually activates something in the hypothalamus, and then that communicates a whole bunch of stuff to happen. You know, and long story short, the nutrients are in the blood, and that goes through the stomach, and then the teeth have roots like trees that draw up that blood, that nutritive blood, into the pulp chamber. And the pulp chamber is like the core, the heart of the tooth. And that's also what gets removed in a root canal. That pulp chamber is removed and then cemented inside. But anyway, so in the pulp chamber, a lot of activities there. And then that blood, through a whole series of awesome biology, gets fenestrated into a lymphatic liquid that the odontoblasts, which are like little kind of pumps in the bone, they pump out this lymphatic fluid onto the surface of the tooth. So it's this inward upward spiral of liquid that goes out onto the tooth, and it's like this microscopic sweat that then coalesces with the saliva to buffer and cleanse the information in the mouth. And the information, I mean like the bacteria, the viruses, the food, and all that. So when that system is stressed, and that could be through like the stress of poor nutrition, spiked blood sugar, not enough fat soluble vitamins, sunshine, vitamin D3, times of hormonal stress like pregnancy or teen time, then that system can stagnate, that system of bringing nutrients to the tooth. And that's not so great. But then if that continues, then the tooth and the system become like the system reverses, and the tooth becomes like a straw. And then the tooth is drawing in bacteria, viruses from the mouth into the tooth. And that's the genesis of a cavity. So I find that fascinating, because through that, we can understand the full connection of our teeth to our body.
Yeah, I love that. And there's not a lot of people talking about that special lymphatic system. And I had actually looked that up prior to our interview. And I looked up, the usual places I go, PubMed and these kinds of things, National Laboratory of Sciences. And there wasn't a lot there. There was some, but actually most of it was in the last couple of years, which is like, what the heck?
Right.
I mean, the lymphatic system, they finally described that in 2012 out of the University of Rochester. And for me, that was like, wow, that was awesome, because I was always taught in medical school that we didn't really know why we were sleeping. We knew it was good for us, but we didn't really know the nuance of what was happening, which we now do thanks to Nattergaard and Jeffrey Iliff in 2012. But this whole dental lymphatic system, I feel like is somewhat like that. It's kind of just coming of age. We're starting to recognize it. And the pulp is really that key area. That's sort of the living aspect of what's happening in the tooth. And when you do a root canal, as you know, we're kind of exterminating that part of the tooth, right? We're filling it up with a bunch of cement and whatnot. And we'll get into the root canal later, but tell me a little bit more about the cavity process and the acid-base balance, that sort of thing. I think many people have questions about how that actually works.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the acidogenic theory of tooth decay came around in the 1940s, and that's when I believe it was the American Dental Association. Apparently there was a meeting in the 40s, and they were on the verge of like, they're trying to decide the official thing. And there was thoughts that there was a systemic connection, but they decided to go for the acidogenic theory, which is, like acids, like soda pop. Is that even a word anymore? But anyway, that kind of a drink, and like sugar sitting on the surface of the teeth. But that really isn't the story. I mean, of course, we do need our saliva and mouths are supposed to be naturally alkaline, and sugar does affect the mouth, but not on that sense of like it on the tooth. It's more about the blood sugar in the body and the spikes in the blood sugar that then create inflammation in the body systems. So the acidogenic theory is very topical in a way, and it's the whole body. Now, again, having a lot of sugar and soda pop is not ideal for the mouth at all, because it also is affecting the body systems, right?
Yeah, no, totally agree. There's we can't ignore that. It's one of my pet peeves about any kind of so-called, medical field that's very hyper focused, whether it be, the dentist that only care about the mouth, or usually that's what they care about, or the cardiologist who only cares about the heart, or the pulmonologist, the lungs, or the nephrologist, the kidneys. They don't like to think outside that one organ. And it's like silly to think that our body doesn't talk to its other parts. Like our body is constantly in communication. Like in today's language, there are text message equivalents going out like crazy in the bloodstream, and they're getting to the tooth, like you mentioned, through the system and through the pulp and through the teeny blood vessels and capillaries that are there, and then that lymphatic system. I mean, it's always in communication. So to think that these things don't talk to each other is just silly. It doesn't make any sense. And then what's cool is, at least now, I think most people appreciate that having issues in the mouth, dental caries or whatever the case may be, periodontitis, inflammation in the mouth, can be also noticed in other parts of the body, can be attributing possibly to heart disease and other kinds of inflammatory conditions, which you and I know very well. The basic root is the inflammation. That's what they all share in common. And so if you have inflammation in your mouth, guess what? You're probably going to have inflammation in other places.
Exactly.
And it's not just topically putting sugar on your teeth or eating candy that way. It's all of those inflammatory processes that occur from eating those highly processed foods. So thank you for addressing that, because I think not enough is spoken of that, especially in my smaller view of the dental spectrum out there, because I would say the holistic dentists are sort of fewer and harder to find than just the average, typical sort of Western trained dentist, if you will. So thank you for sharing that systemic sort of approach. Maybe you can speak to a couple of the things that we can do, like on a daily basis, to augment our body's natural processes to be able to protect our teeth, to keep our teeth. Because you and I know that when Weston Price did his studies on those folks, like none of them had toothbrushes, none of them were flossing their teeth. And so it wasn't really related to the typical things that we think of oral care, which is like brushing and flossing your teeth, right? Had much more to do with diet and things like that. But just explain maybe some of the daily steps that we can do to really take care of our teeth.
Mm-hmm. And first, I think it's always good to know sort of like foundation diet stuff. And whatever path you're eating, it's just good to know what you do need. And vitamin D3, K2 together is so essential. And of course, I'm going to, would add time in the sun as well. It's a different type of, it's it's a water soluble vitamin D that we get instead of the fat soluble, but it's really needed for bones. And we want to remember that teeth are bones. So a lot, this is the same system, and our bones are alive. We kind of maybe forget that as well, but they're in as we know with aging, they can recede, bone loss that can happen in the mouth. So it's really important that we're giving the body what it needs, because no amount of brushing will take care of a bone loss. It might actually make it worse if you're brushing that hard. So it's really important to get those key nutrients, and then also understand some of the anti-nutrients. So for example, somebody on a vegan diet could have some issues because they're not getting those fat soluble vitamins, the D3, the K2, because K2 is very much in dairy products from grass fed. So that's the other thing. Even if you're eating dairy or proteins, it's like if you're eating from factory farmed meats, then you are eating foods grown in the shadows of the factory farms themselves, like literally not being a part of the sun, and only eating the grass. So the chickens, and the cows, so the egg, eating grass, eating outside, being outside, then the eggs have the K2, then the milk has the K2, that kind of thing. So it's important to do that. Or somebody that's vegan might have like oatmeal for breakfast, lentils for lunch, rice for dinner. And then that's a whole bunch of phytic acid, which is an anti-nutrient and very, very negative for oral health. So it's actually kind of pulling nutrients from the body, the phytic acid. And so that can be really key to get those baseline nutrients. And then also, as we said, not having big spikes in blood sugar levels. So if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, that could be a harbinger of, mouth imbalance. And then when we're thinking about sort of what to do topically on the day-to-day, I want to bring to mind also the microbiome. So the oral microbiome, which again is new in our scientific understanding. I feel like it's really come into the play in the past 20 years, really the past 10 years, on a more common knowledge. If we think back in the 80s, we were thinking that the stomach was a sterile environment. So we have come a long way in our understanding, and there's more to learn. But most modern dental care, whether it's from the dentist or you're walking down that drugstore aisle, is chock full of ingredients that mess with the mouth's microbiome. So we're not even, we could talk about the ingredients of like sodium lauryl sulfate that's practically in every toothpaste, that causes bleeding and receding gums, or, the synthetic alcohols and dyes in mouthwash. And there's all those issues with the ingredients and the other things that they can disturb in our body systems. But mainly all that stuff too messes with the microbiome. And what we now know is that actually a mouth of bustling bacteria keeps the dentist away. And that's very different from our sort of scorched earth policy of like germ warfare theory of like, kill the bacteria in the mouth was our plan prior to all of this. And we've got to care for that, for the homeostasis of the mouth's oasis. And that includes alkaline saliva, not using the toxic mouthwashes that create over 36,000 cases of oral cancer a year. And we don't want to be using things that make the mouth acidic or throw off that balance, which so many of the ingredients in toothpaste do. So I created these 8 steps, and a lot of the stuff is, handy things you have around the house. I do make a beautiful dental care line with all kinds of beautiful things and potent dental serums and swishing serums. But that being said, I have created the list so that you can literally do every step with like sea salt or baking soda and things you find around the house. Because if you just swapped all your oral care products and just used baking soda for the rest of your life, you'd be a million times better off than using the stuff from the drugstore.
Do you like hackers? I certainly don't. I hate them. I just can't stand even the thought of being hacked at the airport or any other place where you use public Wi-Fi. And so I have joined ExpressVPN, and you should too. And if you use my code at expressvpn.com/Dr. Thomas, that's DrThomas, you will get 3 months for free. So why stress about the hackers? Why stress about using airport Wi-Fi? I don't any longer. In fact, I use airport Wi-Fi all the time because I'm protected at ExpressVPN. So check it out, expressvpn.com/Dr. Thomas for 3 months free. Yeah, isn't that interesting that having these things that we were always told, and just Nadine, I turned off my camera in case mine is causing the delay here. But the things that we were told all through our formative years about toothpaste and mouthwash. And I mean, literally Listerine is like dropping a grenade in your mouth as far as diminishing and messing with the oral microbiota that is supposed to be there. And you're exactly right about that, that these things, I mean, I think we invented them, quote unquote, for a good reason, at least for what we had limited knowledge of at the time, the so-called germ theory, like you're saying. But in actual fact, they did not, of course, take into consideration the microbiota, which now, thank goodness, is kind of a commonplace term that most of us have heard of, not only in the gut, the microbiome that exists there in the gut, but also in the mouth and really on our skin. We have our whole separate microbiota on the skin that's different than the mouth, it's different than the gut. And all of these are so darn important with our health. And so when we sort of use those to our advantage, they're supposed to work with us symbiotically and synergistically to help us. They really can not only protect our teeth, which is sort of what Weston Price found, right? In those samples that he was finding, even some of them thousands of years old, right? He noticed that when people were eating real food, not a bunch of the grains and corns and things that were more sort of farmed and manufactured, that the people tended to have much better teeth. And so he noticed this as early as the 1930s, wrote the initial book on it, and then he was sharing the message for quite a while. And so I just think he did such formative work in this area, but it just reminds us of the simplicity with it, which is exactly what you're explaining. My grandfather, for example, he knew this. He brushed his teeth with baking soda. Like back in the day, he used baking soda for brushing his teeth, and he used it for deodorant. He didn't use the aluminum. He didn't use all the other chemicals. Like, he was onto something. My same grandfather, he used, I believe it was Saccharomyces boulardii, which I think is the brewer's yeast. And he used to take that every single day. Like, he was way ahead of the curve, and he lived till he was almost 100 years old, and he had type 1 diabetes. And so like
way to go, Gramps.
I don't know where he learned. I wish I would have had a chance, to ask him where he learned all this stuff. But that is the cool thing about this, is that these are mostly simple techniques that people can do even without a fancy dental line of products, of which you have some amazing ones, which I think are awesome. But people can do this at home simply. Why don't you talk about briefly just the technique of brushing? I've heard you speak to this, and like, pretend you're teaching one of my kids, like, how should they brush their teeth? How often? Like, how should they really do this? I love how you explain it.
Oh, that's fun. Well, I think first, one of the great things to do with kids is also to just rinse the mouth. And so I've got recipes in my books, but you don't really need a recipe. You just take like a mason jar of water, and you can add, it's about 16 ounces. You can add, half an ounce of sea salt. And you can just have that like brine in the bathroom with like a few shot glasses for the family. And, or you can even do one with baking soda. And to that, you can even add like a drop of peppermint or something too. But anyway, that simple sea salt water is so great for alkalizing the mouth, rinsing, and just setting the tone. So for kids, because they're not going to get even adults don't get everywhere, right? So kids have a long, like about 10 years where they're getting more dexterous, and they got to brush their teeth the whole time. So the rinses really help. And then when you're brushing, so we just brush like back and forth. And a lot of people are actually brushing too hard. And we got to take care of the gums. They're like the secret sauce to the mouth. And they're holding the teeth in place. So a lot of sensitivity, just that classic, like, too sensitive for cold water. You reach for the Sensodyne kind of thing, which is an issue because it actually kind of anesthetizes the mouth. And so, you're fine, but you're not solving the problem. Right. So you can't just, So people have found our toothpastes work really well. They're very baking soda based. So our frankincense one's really great for sensitive teeth. and there's no anesthetizing chemicals in there. And literally they clear up the sensitive teeth. So when the gums are, not, they're not feeling so good, they're inflamed, they're maybe receding, that affects the tooth, and then the teeth get sensitive from that. So really the key to teeth sensitivity is a lot about the care of the gums. And so our brushing can be quite harsh, and the back and forth, especially so if we take the top line and then you're going up, right? So then you're pushing stuff under the gum and you're kind of sending it into receding. And then most people are applying too much pressure. So like your toothbrush 6 months down the road, the bristles should look like they did when you bought them, like not splayed or, bending in any way. That shows way too much. And everybody from baby, like a kid, to a 200-pound fireman, everybody needs the soft heads on the toothbrush. So always get soft. And then you're brushing, but in one direction. So it will take a moment to kind of break that other habit. But so in the top, you're just going down, and you can get quite quick. So it's down, 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 not up and down. And on the bottom teeth, it's gum to gum up. And then also while you're there, like get your brush like right up, like where you're in the top, it would be like where the cheek and the gum join. You want to do that area as well. And you can almost do that like a separate moment where you're brushing the gums. Obviously you're going to be hitting the teeth, but you're just focusing the first little bit on the gums that's stimulating to the gums. And then if you're working with something like one of our dental serums, and I have recipes where you can make your own, which is working with, I call them botanical biotics, which are, plant extracts and stuff. And that will also be very healing to put on the gums and help that tissue heal. Because while the gum is it's very thin, it's like one epithelium, which just means super thin. So it can bleed and get aggravated easily, but at the same time, it can heal super fast. So we've had people be able to turn around their bleeding gums in like 24, 48 hours and not have that again. So that's important. And I just want to say about the botanical serums, because that's what really brought me into dental care, is it's really cool now because now we have the modern science that's able to then kind of give us answers as to why a lot of botanicals we've been using for thousands of years. So before I even knew this stuff, working with like tea tree, cardamom, clove, rose, frankincense, mastic, like those have been used for thousands of years in different cultures for oral care. And so now through lab work, we can understand a little bit more why they're so useful. And what was discovered is that things like clove and cinnamon and the oils I've mentioned, they are known as quorum sensing inhibitors, which QSI for short. And what that means is the phytoplankton, so we'll just call it the bad bacteria, they're normally just sort of floating around like on their own in the body. And then when they're able to quorum sense, that means they're able to gain traction and gain in their numbers and start grouping up, kind of like they get to be like a little gang of bacteria. And then that can create biofilms and that kind of thing. And, we know things now, like even antibiotics are used a lot in oral care, but they can't necessarily bust through those biofilms or the plaque. And so, something like clove can literally get rid of the pathogen, but work with the beneficial bacteria without destroying them. So they're literally like the perfect things we need for our mouths. I mean, and in different, even essential oils like rosemary are now used in chicken feed in Europe, so they don't have to use antibiotics. So these distilled essences of things like clove, cinnamon, rosemary, tea tree, they're able to really clean up the mouth while they're not disturbing the beneficial bacteria, which is the key to success in the oral environment. And even something like hydrogen peroxide, which is very useful when used in moderation with the mouth, because sometimes it can be too astringent. But hydrogen peroxide has that same intelligence of being able to, banish the pathogen, but keep the beneficial bacteria in the mouth intact.
Do you ever get tired of planning, prepping, and cooking your own healthy meals? Well, I know I do. And so you've got to check out Trifecta Nutrition. They ship pre-made, high quality, with great ingredient meals right to your door. From paleo to keto to vegan and so much more. They have delicious meals for every diet. You got to go over there to trifectanutrition.com and check out the code Dr. Thomas, DrThomas, for 40% off at checkout. So trifectanutrition.com and use the code DrThomas at checkout and get yourself 40% off. I hope you'll enjoy it as I do. Aloha. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's so critical because in the same way, as you mentioned, if you're on antibiotics, for example, that are often indiscriminate, right? They kill the bad guys, but they also kill the good guys too. And they really mess with the whole sort of big milieu or the big picture of things. And when you use these natural ingredients, they do have the anti-quorum sensing capability, like you said, which is exactly how you described it. It's kind of these guys getting together in bigger groups to really wreak the havoc that they do. And it messes with that system of communication. So they're sort of on their own and they can't really gang up and make the biofilm, make these processes that are deleterious or harmful to both our teeth and our overall health. So I love how you explain that so simply. I would love it if we could talk just briefly. I know lots of people have questions about I know it's sort of Pandora's box, but the root canal. Too many people are getting root canals. And if you've already had one, what can you do? Or if you can't avoid one, I usually try to get people to avoid them if they can. But let's just speak for a moment about root canals. You're expert in this.
Yeah. So first, also you may not always need one. I do have, in Renegade Beauty, there's I have the holistic dental care book. And then in Renegade Beauty, my more recent book, there's a really juicy dental chapter. And I talk about a couple journalists that went in and did, really understood what they need in their mouth. And then one went to 50 different dentists. And it was ranging from $500 to $30,000. And then a lot of them missed the actual work that needed to be done. So that's a whole thing. But and then when the American Dental Association was asked to comment on the article, they said dentistry is an art. So I thought that was really interesting because we really think it's the lab coats and the black and white of the x-rays. It feels very, I don't know, set in stone, so to speak. So just know that you got to know if you really, really need one. Is that tooth a candidate for a root canal? Can other things be done to help it? And only a really good dentist will know that. So there's that. So if you've got one if you've got one that you're supposed to be getting, then you want to find a dentist that will do something else. If it's in the molars, you're pretty good because you don't have to make other decisions. You can literally have that extracted, and you do need to get it extracted generally. And let me tell you about root canals first, just so we get what it is.
Yeah.
So, because I forgot, not everybody would know. So we talked about it earlier. That pulp chamber is just too decayed, basically, for the tooth to go on, and the tooth is now dead. So the concept's really, it seems like a good concept, right? Well, let's just, take out the living stuff, cement it, and then you at least have your own tooth aesthetically and as a chewing surface. So that kind of makes sense, except they think that's supposed to hermetically seal the tooth, but it doesn't. And what the testing shows is that it's a necrotic nest, a breeding ground of bacteria that gets put into the bloodstream sort of every time you chew. Because again, the body is connected. So because it's been sealed off too, it's anaerobic, no fresh oxygen or white blood cells can get there to help deal with it. And so it's impossible. Well, dentists thought or think it sterilizes the tooth. It doesn't. And it's also because, and this always blows my mind because it's this tooth, but there's 300 meters of microscopic tubes in one molar. It's microscopic. And it always just blows my mind. I always have to check that stat. How do we fit that in there? Right. But as you can see, that's just impossible to sterilize, right? It's just not happening. So one of my favorite dentists, Dr. Nunnally in Texas, he did an independent study where they took textbook perfect root canals. And I write about this in Renegade Beauty. So in an x-ray, they were showing up perfectly, no irritation for the person. And they removed them and sent them to the lab. And all of the samples had severe bacteria. And just showing 100% of root canal teeth are harboring that. So if you have one, you may have a constitution that's fine and can kind of handle that. Maybe you have to think about it down the road, but you're okay right now. So just know that. However, if you do feel something has shifted in your health, or there's an autoimmune thing or something, then, you would want to look into removing that. But to get the extract, so here's the other thing. You do want that tooth extracted. If it's a back molar, you can literally just have the space. You don't need to put anything in. But if it's in the front, then you've got to make a decision if you're going to have like a bridge, but then that does shave off a bit of the good teeth on either side, or a post, which would then hold a tooth. And then that post is like drilled into your jawbone. And typically, for however many years, we've been using titanium posts, and titanium is a very toxic metal. So if you have to get a post, you want to work with zirconium, which has been used in Europe for quite a few decades. Anything you're bringing to the body is going to be a challenge to the immune system because it's a foreign object, but the zirconium has a very good track record. It seems to be the best. There are also stuff with ceramic, but I have to look into that more because sometimes ceramic can have metal in it. So I got to check into that more, but there are other options. Do not get titanium. So that's if it's in the front. But here's the thing too, you've got to go to a dentist again that knows what they're doing, because you have to also get the periodontal ligament removed. And that it's taught like they just leave it in. So this is sort of newer to dentistry, but the biological dentists know that that has to be removed. It was explained to me by Dr. Hal Huggins that it was akin to leaving the placenta in during birth. So if you have a wisdom tooth extraction or an extraction for any reason, or just an extraction, they will leave that periodontal ligament in, and that's just classically trained. And then the gum grows over it. And then what you could have down the road is a jaw cavitation, which is what it sounds like, a cavity in the jaw. These do not show up on an x-ray until there's about 80% rot in that area. So again, a lot of dentists may not even know about this. They sound like foreign words to them, or they've never heard of it. But, it's very much a thing, just not taught in dental school. So these are the issues. And again, if you're going to have your root canal extracted, you don't want to go to a regular dentist that will then just leave that periodontal ligament in. You're going to have the area really cleansed. You want to work with a dentist that has ozone to flush it out. And then PRP therapy, it is called a few different things, but it's basically plasma therapy, which is your own blood is removed at the dentist, because it doesn't have to be done by a doctor. We can do it done by a nurse practitioner too. And your plasma is removed. Then it goes through a centrifuge, which separates out the blood, like the red blood part from the plasma in the blood. And you have this beautiful golden liquid of your own plasma with your own stem cells. And then that would get injected to the area and create the healing. But if you have like an older jaw cavitation, or there is like jaw rot, then you would have those things done. But then the dentist also has to scrape the bone, clear away the decay, allow a blood clot to form, which cleanses and stabilizes the area. And so that is the depth of dealing with root canals and jaw cavitations. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's awesome, because a lot of this people just don't know about. And it's something that I think actually even the physiology is not that complicated, because when I think about it, if you leave the periodontal ligament, you're still leaving a potential nidus of infection. So you're not removing everything. I get that it's the easier thing to remove, but you're actually leaving a potential source of what we would call a micro abscess, or a small little pocket of infection. And when that's left to its own devices, and over time, like naturally, it's going to get bigger and it's going to start, growing, and you'll get it. Unfortunately, like you said, it takes much longer before you can actually see it on an x-ray, for example. X-rays are not super sensitive to pick that up. And so just knowing about it, knowing is half the battle, like they say, right? But then if you actually can find a dentist who is familiar with these kinds of things, biologic dentist, like you said, or holistic dentist that's accustomed to this, not only teaching, but approach, how to remove the periodontal ligament and that sort of thing. I mean, what a game changer that can be. And like you said, some people just have a great immune system. And although they may have some, root canal or two in their mouth, they don't have any issues, but that's not the case with everybody. And so if they're able to, like you said, I 100% agree, especially if they're in the back teeth, like the molars, that you could extract and not really have any significant consequence, as far as you don't have to do an implant, you don't have to do any kind of bridge or any other prosthesis, if you will, that you could live with just fine. those would be kind of like the no-brainers. Why not just have those taken care of? But the others in the front, of course, that presents a little bit more of a challenging approach. And you definitely want to find somebody who's not only versed in this, but has the skills to be able to do these things and remove the periodontal ligament and that sort of thing. So, wow, that was a mouthful, pun intended, but it was awesome.
We also have on our website like an article on like what to ask prospective dentists, dental practices, so you can find, and then some organizations to help you find the right dentist. And then also another article on like preparing to go to the dentist, like what you can do, months to days in advance.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing I wanted to just quickly get your take on before we move, I'd like to talk a little bit about the skin, because it's such an important organ, if you will, and is connected to the gut, as we know. But could you just briefly touch on the whole business about flossing? Do you recommend it? Do you not recommend it? If you do it, what kind of floss would you recommend? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I do recommend it. It's funny how it's kind of controversial. I feel like everything on the planet right now is two opposing sides. Yeah. Anyway, I'm totally into flossing. Here's the fun part though, is adding like a dental serum to that, because then you're really amplifying. You get to have those botanical biotics and those quorum sensing inhibitors. So you put it along the floss and then you floss, and then you're getting that right up in between the teeth and those little parts of the gum that you can never really access. It's getting that botanical love. So it's really good. And I actually recommend flossing twice, especially if you're first starting with the dental steps for the first few months. And people are like, why? Anyway, if you floss twice, you'll know, because that second round, you're still getting more plaque out of your mouth and stuff.
So twice in a row, you mean? Not like morning and
twice
night,
in a row.
Actually twice at the same time. Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
I often do that too, because I notice stuff still comes out. I didn't have any data to support it, but that's kind of my own practice.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? And then Dr. Steven Sinatra, who's a heart doctor expert. He's written quite a few books. I don't totally remember the exact stat, but something like studies were showing that like flossing can add like 7 years to your life because of that arterial plaque. It can contribute to and affecting the heart. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Wow. That seems like a pretty easy way. I always floss because my dentist told me I only have to floss the teeth that I want to keep. If I don't care about keeping them, I don't need to floss. But I've always been motivated by just keeping my own teeth.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
But yeah, that's super important to decrease that potential. We call it in medicine, we call it a nidus, N-I-D-U-S. That's kind of like a little area of infection that can be occurring that you can't really see, but it's there and it's seeding the blood on a daily basis. And so that's the whole purpose behind getting that crap out of there with flossing. And so with respect to flossing, I think you have to do exactly what Nadine has recommended with respect to the products we use. We have to pay attention to what products we're putting in there, because not everything that's dental floss is create equal. Maybe just
you don't want the petroleum waxed stuff. We have one that we have, like Dr. Tongue's is a really good one that we carry, and it's really good for not sensitive, but really tight teeth. And then we also make one we infuse with frankincense and it's on silk, and then one we have infused with wintergreen and charcoal, and it's on a string. So we have a lot of variety.
That's awesome. I love all of those ingredients and all of those things. And I can tell you personally, sometimes it's a challenge, because if you do have very tight teeth and you can't get anything in there, then somebody would naturally look for some kind of petroleum base or the Teflon base or all these products that'll kind of slide in there. But
I didn't know there was
I would
Teflon
say also
plus.
Once you start, oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's anything. If you dream it, it's there. But what I would recommend to people is if you start slow, the more you do floss, the more sort of easy it will be. And even if your teeth are tight, just give it some time. Don't just call it off because your first day was uncomfortable or annoying and it was difficult. It does get better. And I can speak to that because I used to be one who used those lubricated products and the so-called Glide and all these other waxed and things, because I felt like my teeth couldn't accept anything else. But guess what? They do, but it does take time sometimes. So be patient. Don't give up too early. because I think it'll make a big difference in the end. So I would love if you have a moment to just chat a little bit about the skin. I know it's, one of your passion, and probably your original passion was with respect to the skin and creating products for the skin. Maybe just speak to the skin and the microbiome and how it's connected to the gut, and then why we should care about our skin and how to take care of it.
Well, for sure. Just like our mouths are filled with bacteria that are actually useful to us, really with our skin, we want to allow the bacteria to be the beautician. And really those blackheads and things or breakouts, is connected to the gut microbiome as well as the skin microbiome. And just as the modern mouth products have been messing with the microbiome, so has, every cleanser and acne product and all of that too. Or the exfoliating or the chemical peels. We're really just destroying that top layer of skin, the stratum corneum. And as gross as it sounds, we need the bacteria to eat the sebum, to eat some of those dead skin cells, and it really does sound gross, but that's all happening on a microscopic level. And so we don't want to mess with the skin's microbiome. For example, like soap, you just use that for like pit spits, washing your hands. And then I think the best, simplest advice I can give for skincare is to wash and cleanse with oil. Of course, not petroleum or anything like that. We make beauty, and in the health world, not with almond oil or grapeseed oil. Those are usually processed with other oils. They're rancid. No. They're bleach deodorized. By the time you're getting them, they are rancid, except maybe they've added preservatives so that you don't notice that it's rancid. So all that kind of stuff. We have our best skin evers, a whole range for men, women. And, if you're not using that, I also have recipes to make your own, or you just use a beautiful, true, virgin organic olive oil or jojoba. Jojoba is my favorite oil because it actually is like the closest to our sebum. It's a liquid wax from a desert plant. And it actually is so stable that if stored properly, it can be stable for 100 years. So it's very different for a fatty oil to have that kind of tenacity. And so I love jojoba, and you just cleanse with the water and the oil. And that's how we've been cleansing our skins. And since ancient times, and many different cultures had different ways where they would cleanse with oil, with they would even use, instead of cloth, like horns or streagles or different instruments where they would oil the body and then take or the gua sha. A lot of women are familiar with that. And then, scraping's not really the right word, but you're scraping the skin. It's just very gentle. And then that's cleansing. And you can do that with a cloth and oil for the face. And then just another squirt for the moisture. And that's how I've been cleansing my skin for the past 30 years. And it's going well.
That's awesome. The way I would describe that whole process that you said at the beginning of basically when, we might, because we were taught, right, to use all these skin cleansers and all these kind of products, is of course we're disrupting the good bacteria that are there. We're messing with the normal inhabitants that are there to help us. The process that's happening where you have your own native bacteria breaking down the old dead skin cells. Yeah. The way I look at it is sort of like the autophagy of the skin. It's the self-cleaning, it's the self-repairing. It's just the way nature would have it. And if we let it nature is smart. We are smart. Our bodies are really intelligent. And I think sometimes we as humans kind of try to outsmart nature, and we get in the way. We develop all these products that sort of sound like they make sense. They're quote unquote cleansing, but they're actually disturbing. They're messing with the good stuff that's there. And oh my gosh, I would just call it the natural process of the skin that is the skin autophagy, right? We all know about autophagy that occurs when we're fasting. Well, this is a skin version of autophagy. The real, normal cells, the bacterial cells that live there, are just cleansing our old dead skin cells. They're helping to get it out of the way. We don't need to scrub it harshly. We don't need to use these strong chemicals. This is a natural thing, and we need to let it do its thing because it knows how to do that. So thank you for sharing that and how easy it can be. I mean, I've heard you talk about this before. You can literally just get a terry cloth and wipe it on your body. You don't need any of these super abrasive things that are sold. You don't need one of those, what is it? The pumice thing that people use. I used to use that as a kid to clean my toilet with. That's where I knew about that stuff, is I would scrub the toilet, and people use that to scrub their skin, but it's so dang abrasive. Holy moly, you don't need that.
If anybody's feeling a bit or they have acne or and they feel shy because the oil, but again, this is not petroleum oil. This is using real oil, but it clears up. That's the thing. I mean, people with like cystic acne for a decade are like, feeling their skin change, like 48 hours, 1 week, 2 weeks. And then there's like a whole new world in a month or two later. And it's like actually getting to the root of the issue, because we're like, so many irritants are really a part of modern skincare.
Oh my gosh, you make it so easy, so simple. I love that about you. And it can be that simple. And thank you for just being the light that you are and sharing this. I'd love to just give you the last couple of moments to share anything else that you'd love our viewers and listeners to hear, and then how people can reach out to you, how they can get your books, your products, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think, well, sometimes, I mean, all this information can be new and maybe feel daunting, but, just like one step at a time, and knowing that maybe it feels like complicated at first, but things do get simpler. And really feel free to email us at sage@livinglibations.com, any questions, health, dental, beauty, and we'll try, and send you like on the right path or give the information. And we also do consults as well, totally free. It's just part of what we do, because we really believe in the education, because we're approaching beauty in a different way too, and kind of undoing things. So it does take a little more education, but it's like, may feel restrictive or you can't do that or that. But once you kind of move through that door, there's just like a whole new banquet and a beautiful way to be with the body, take care of the body, feel confident in the skin you're in. And then we're at livinglibations.com. Instagram is mine's Nadine Artemis official, and Living Libations. And then my books are on the website, Amazon and all those places as well. They're also on Audible.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Livinglibations.com. That's actually a wonderful story. I've heard how you came up with that name, and it's beautiful and wonderful. We'll have to get you back to talk more about that and about more of the skincare stuff. But what a pleasure it's been to have you here with us today, Nadine. It's just been a real gift. Thank you so much. And I'll be sure to put all your contacts in the show notes. And I hope people will follow you, that they will get your products, that they will support you, because you're doing great work out there. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. It was really lovely meeting you today.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss out on any future episode. And I'd love to hear your comments and feedback. If there's any topic you'd love to hear about, you're dying to know, burning questions, please comment below and let me know what future topics are of interest to you.